The sky was empty at dawn, completely empty. Just gray clouds hanging low over the Belgian countryside, the kind that makes you feel like the world has shrunk down to just the ground beneath your feet, and nothing more. I remember thinking it was too quiet. After months of artillery fire, of Spitfires screaming overhead, of tank treads churning up every road from Normandy to Brussels, the silence felt wrong, unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. I was 23 years old, forward artillery observer, 43rd Wessex Division. My job was simple, at least on paper. Watch the enemy, calculate firing solutions, call in the guns. Keep your head down. Stay alive. I'd been doing it since Normandy, since those first terrible days on the beaches when the world exploded around us and we wondered if we'd ever see England again. But we'd survived. We'd pushed through France. We'd liberated Paris, Brussels, Antwerp. By September 1944, we honestly believed the war might be over by Christmas. I should have known better. It was September 17th, Sunday morning. I was positioned in a forward observation post just south of the Dutch border, near a small Belgian village whose name I can never quite remember anymore. The locals had given us bread and cheese the night before, smiling, touching our uniforms like we were liberators from some ancient myth. Maybe we were. Maybe that's what we looked like to them. Young men in khaki bringing freedom on our backs. But we were just scared kids trying not to die. My partner that morning was a lance corporal named Davies. Welsh boy, couldn't have been more than 19. Had a picture of his girl back home that he'd show anyone who'd look. Sarah, her name was. Blonde hair, pretty smile. He'd talk about marrying her when the war ended, about buying a little house in Cardiff, about having kids and growing old together. I'd listen and nod and try not to think about the odds of any of us making it home to do those things. We were checking our equipment when we heard it. A low rumble in the distance like thunder, but it wasn't thunder. It was too steady, too mechanical. Davies looked at me, his eyes suddenly wide. Aircraft, he said. Lot of them. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the northern horizon. At first I saw nothing but clouds. Then the clouds seemed to move, to darken, and I realized they weren't clouds at all. They were planes, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. C-47 transport aircraft flying in formation. So many that they filled the entire northern sky like a great mechanical river flowing overhead. I'd never seen anything like it. Even at Normandy, even on D-Day, I hadn't seen this many aircraft in one place at one time. The sound grew louder, a roar that seemed to shake the ground beneath us, and I felt something in my chest. Fear, yes, but also awe. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to be enormous. Jesus Christ, Davies whispered beside me. Where are they going? I didn't answer because I didn't know, but I knew it was north. I knew it was deep into occupied Holland, and I knew that wherever those planes were going, men were about to die. The formation passed directly over our position. The noise was deafening, a thunder that went on and on and on. I could see the markings on the wings, the invasion stripes painted on the fuselages. American planes mostly, but British too. Sterlings, Dakotas, Halifaxes, and between them, gliders. Hundreds of gliders being towed behind the powered aircraft like silent ghosts, their thin plywood frames looking impossibly fragile against the gray sky. Inside those planes and gliders were men, paratroopers, airborne infantry, the best soldiers we had, or so they told us. Young men who'd volunteered to jump out of perfectly good aircraft and land behind enemy lines with nothing but a rifle and the man next to them. I'd met a few of them in England before the invasion. Cocky bastards, most of them, with their jump boots and their swagger. But they had a right to be cocky. They were doing something the rest of us couldn't even imagine. The formations kept coming. Wave after wave after wave. 30 minutes, 45, an hour. The sky was black with them. I tried to count but gave up around 200 aircraft. There were too many. Far too many. Davies had stopped talking entirely. He just stood there, staring up with his mouth open, and I could see tears running down his face, though I don't think he knew he was crying. They're going for the bridges, I said finally. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. They must be. The bridges over the Rhine. Davies blinked and looked at me. That's bloody miles behind enemy lines. 60 miles, I said. Maybe more. I'd seen the maps, we all had. The Rhine was the last great natural barrier between the Allies and Germany. If we could capture the bridges intact, if we could get armor across before the Germans could blow them, We could drive straight into the industrial heart of the Reich. End the war in weeks, maybe. Montgomery's plan. Market garden, they were calling it. Market for the airborne assault. Garden for the ground offensive that would link up with them. It was brilliant. It was audacious. It was insane. Will they make it? Davies asked. Will they survive? I lowered my binoculars and looked at him. He was so young. So damn young. I don't know, I said. And that was the truth. I didn't know. But I had a bad feeling, a sick weight in my stomach that told me this was going to be bad. Very bad. The last of the formations passed overhead and continued north. The sound faded gradually like a storm moving away, until finally there was silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This silence was heavy with dread, with anticipation, with the knowledge that somewhere north of us, men were about to jump into hell. We stayed at our post for another hour, listening to the radio chatter, trying to piece together what was happening. The reports were confusing at first. Airborne drops in progress. Arnhem, Nijmegen, Eindhoven. 3 major cities, 3 major bridges. The American 101st and 82nd Airborne taking the southern bridges. The British 1st Airborne Division going for Arnhem. The farthest bridge, the prize that would open the road to Germany. A bridge too far, I muttered. What? Davies looked at me. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the phrase. A bridge too far. It felt prophetic somehow, like I'd glimpsed the future and seen disaster written there. By afternoon, we received orders to move north. The ground offensive was beginning. XXX Corps, led by the Guards Armored Division, would drive up a single highway through German-held territory and link up with the airborne forces. 60 miles in 3 days. That was the plan. 60 miles through enemy territory on one road, while 35,000 paratroopers held the bridges and waited for relief. It sounded impossible when they briefed us. It sounded even more impossible as we joined the column and began moving north. The highway was chaos. Tanks, half-tracks, trucks, artillery pieces all jammed together in a single-file column because the road was elevated above the Dutch polders and there was nowhere else to go. One road, one direction. If the Germans hit us from the sides, we'd be slaughtered. And they knew it, everyone knew it. But we kept moving because that's what soldiers do. You follow orders. You move forward. You try not to think about the odds. I rode in a Bren carrier near the front of the column. The weather had turned worse. Rain was falling. That cold Dutch rain that seeps through everything and chills you to the bone. The countryside around us was flat and open, dotted with small farms and villages. We passed through Valkenswaard on the first day. The Dutch came out to greet us, cheering, throwing flowers, offering food and drink. They thought we were liberating them. And we were, I suppose. But I kept thinking about those paratroopers up ahead landing behind enemy lines, and I wondered if we'd reach them in time. That first night we bivouacked just south of Eindhoven. The reports from up ahead were mixed. The 101st Airborne had captured some bridges but met heavy resistance. The 82nd was fighting for Nijmegen and Arnhem. The reports from Arnhem were confused. Radio problems, they said. Communication difficulties. But I could read between the lines. Something was wrong up there. Something was very wrong. I found Davies that evening. He was sitting by a fire, still clutching that picture of his Sarah. Think they made it? He asked. The lads who jumped? Some of them, I said. Not all. He nodded slowly. My cousin joined the Airborne. Billy. Haven't heard from him in months. He might be up there. At Arnhem. I didn't know what to say to that. So I sat down next to him, and we stared at the fire and listened to the rain and didn't talk about the odds of his cousin being alive. The next day, September 18th, we pushed forward again. Eindhoven was burning. The Germans had hit it with artillery before pulling out. We could see smoke rising from the city center. Buildings collapsed. Civilians digging through rubble looking for survivors. The smell of burning wood and worse things hung in the air. This was liberation. This was what we'd brought them. The resistance stiffened as we moved north. German 88s started hitting the column from hidden positions in the farmland. We'd hear the crack of the gun, then the explosion as a tank or truck went up in flames. Men would scramble out, some of them on fire, screaming. The column would stop. Engineers would clear the wreckage, we'd move forward again, and then another 88 would fire, and the whole horrible process would repeat. I was calculating firing solutions constantly, calling in counter-battery fire whenever we spotted a German gun position. But there were so many of them, and we were so exposed on that single highway. A bridge too far, I kept thinking. A bridge too goddamn far. On September 19th, we heard that the 82nd Airborne had taken the bridge at Nijmegen. Good news, finally. But Arnhem remained silent. The radio reports were ominous now. Heavy resistance, unable to reach bridge, casualties mounting. The British 1st Airborne was supposed to hold the bridge at Arnhem for 2 days, maybe 3. We were supposed to relieve them by September 20th at the latest. But we weren't going to make it. I knew it. Davies knew it. Probably everyone knew it, though no one wanted to say it out loud. The Germans were fighting for every inch of ground now. The Dutch SS, we heard. Waffen SS units that had been refitting near Arnhem. The intelligence had missed them completely. Thousands of SS troops with tanks and artillery, right where our lightly armed paratroopers were landing. It was a nightmare. A complete disaster waiting to happen. We finally crossed the bridge at Nijmegen on September 20th. The Americans who'd taken it looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, covered in mud and blood. Arnhem? One of them asked me as we passed. I just shook my head. I didn't know. Nobody knew. The column pushed forward toward Arnhem, but the resistance was incredible now. German armor was hitting us from both sides. The road was littered with burned-out vehicles, dead horses, bodies. The rain kept falling. The world had turned gray and cold and endless. On September 21st, we heard that the British 1st Airborne was surrounded, pushed into a small perimeter in the village of Oosterbeek just west of Arnhem. They'd never taken the bridge. They'd never even gotten close. Now they were trapped, running low on ammunition, low on food, low on medical supplies, and we still couldn't reach them. I thought about those men I'd watched drop from the sky, thousands of them floating down on their parachutes, disappearing into the Dutch countryside. I'd wondered if they'd survive. Now I knew the answer. Most of them wouldn't. We tried. God knows we tried. We pushed forward, inch by bloody inch, fighting through German positions, calling in artillery, airstrikes, everything we had. But it wasn't enough. The Germans had reinforced the corridor. They'd brought in tanks, anti-tank guns, infantry divisions. For every mile we gained, we paid in blood and steel. Davies was killed on September 22nd. We were under fire from a German position in a tree line when an 88 shell hit the Bren carrier next to ours. Shrapnel went everywhere. I felt something hot slash across my arm but didn't realize I'd been hit until I saw the blood. Davies took a piece of shrapnel in the chest. He went down without a sound, just crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut. I dragged him behind cover and tried to stop the bleeding, but there was too much blood, too much damage. He looked up at me with those young eyes and tried to say something, but only blood came out. I held his hand while he died. It took maybe 2 minutes, the longest 2 minutes of my life. When it was over, I took the picture of Sarah from his pocket and put it in mine. Someone needed to tell her. Someone needed to let her know he died thinking of her. That night, September 22nd, we finally received orders to fall back. The 1st Airborne was done. They'd held out for 9 days, 4 times longer than planned, but they couldn't hold any longer. An evacuation was being organized. Anyone who could make it across the Rhine would be pulled out. The rest would be left behind. We heard the evacuation happened on the night of September 25th. Out of the nearly 10,000 British paratroopers who'd landed at Arnhem, fewer than 2,500 made it out. The rest were dead or captured. An entire division, the best soldiers we had, destroyed in 9 days. All for a bridge we never took. A bridge too far. I think about them often, even now, 63 years later. I'm 90 years old. I've lived a long life, had children, grandchildren, seen the world change in ways I never could have imagined back in 1944. But I still see those parachutes sometimes when I close my eyes. Thousands of them. White silk against a gray sky. Men floating down to earth like falling angels. I wondered if they'd survive. Most of them didn't. The worst part is that it didn't have to happen. The intelligence was wrong. The planning was flawed. The timeline was impossible. We sent those men into a meat grinder and then couldn't get them out. Montgomery called it 90% successful because we'd captured some of the bridges. But 10% failure meant thousands of dead paratroopers. Thousands of young men who'd never go home, never marry their sweethearts, never have children or grow old. Davies was buried in a military cemetery in the Netherlands. I went back there once in the 1980s to visit his grave. Found Sarah's picture still in my old uniform jacket and left it on his headstone. Seemed right somehow. She should be with him, at least in spirit. I hope they're together now, wherever they are. I hope he finally got his little house and his kids and his life with her, even if it's only in whatever comes after this. Operation Market Garden failed. We didn't end the war by Christmas. The fighting went on for another 8 months, all the way to Berlin, all the way to the bitter end. Tens of thousands more died. But I think Market Garden was the moment I stopped believing in plans, stopped believing that ambition and audacity and brilliant strategies could overcome reality. War doesn't care about plans. War just grinds on, chewing up men and spitting out bodies until one side can't grind anymore. I saw the first paratroopers drop behind enemy lines. I watched them disappear into the Dutch countryside, brave and young and doomed. I wondered if they'd survive. And now, all these years later, I know the answer. Some did, most didn't, but they all did their duty. They all jumped when ordered. They all fought to the last, and for that they deserve to be remembered. Not as part of Montgomery's 90% success, but as men who paid the price for someone else's ambition. Men who died for a bridge too far. The sky is empty again today. Just clouds and birds and the occasional plane flying high overhead. But sometimes when it's gray and quiet like it was that September morning, I swear I can still hear them coming. That mechanical thunder, that roar of engines filling the sky. And I look up expecting to see them again, thousands of parachutes blossoming like white flowers against the clouds, carrying men into history, into battle, into death. I'm 90 years old now. I'll be gone soon, I suppose. Join Davies and all the others who never made it home. But before I go, I wanted someone to know what I saw, what we all saw. I wanted someone to understand that behind every military operation, every strategic plan, every percentage of success or failure, there are men, real men with real lives and real dreams, men who jumped because they were ordered to, men who died because someone made a mistake. I saw the first paratroopers drop behind enemy lines, and I've carried them with me ever since. Every one of them, every parachute, every life cut short. They're part of me now, woven into my memory like thread into cloth, impossible to separate, impossible to forget. This is my story, this is what I saw, and this is what I'll take with me when I finally close my eyes for the last time and let the gray silence take me home. The sky was empty at dawn, and by evening, it was full of ghosts.